Welcome to the Men Only podcast. In the UK, nearly one person dies every day due to alcohol addiction. Public Health Scotland reports Scots drink 50% more than the recommended units, more than England and Wales. In Scotland, alcohol-related deaths in 2023 hit a 15-year high, with a projection, should current patterns continue, of a 21% increase in alcohol-related disease burden by 2048. Listen to what the Men Only guests have to say from a recovering alcoholic's perspective and how it affects those with family member or friend in the grip of alcohol addiction. Learn how companies can help if they suspect an employee needs support and the signs to look out for. Finally, we discuss and demystify Alcoholics Anonymous, an organisation that has helped millions of alcoholics around the world to achieve sobriety by taking one day at a time. If you're concerned about your drinking, worried about someone you know, this is the podcast to watch. Welcome to the Men Only podcast. Today we are discussing alcohol addiction, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Mark and Andy. Just to explain, these are not my guests' actual names, as they've requested to remain anonymous in order that we can have a more in-depth conversation, informative discussion about the impact of alcohol as a recovering alcoholic and as a family member. Before we start, I'd like to draw attention to the current statistics on alcoholism. Within the UK, alcohol kills someone nearly every hour. We are actually, at this moment, in Glasgow. So I'm going to show a Scottish perspective on this. The stats, according to the Public Health Scotland, Scots have a significant alcohol problem. Adults consume 50% above the units required, recommended by the Chief Medical Officer. Now that's a safe drinking unit of about 14 units. That's more than England and Wales. In Scotland, alcohol-related deaths in 2023 hit a 15-year high, impacting the more deprived areas. The projection, if current patterns continue, will be a 21% increase in alcohol-related diseases burden by 2048. Now, I want to quote from a consultant from Public Health Medicine and Public Health Scotland. Now, this is what the doctor says. The newly released data provides compelling evidence that despite progress, Scotland's relationship with alcohol remains deeply problematic and requires immediate attention. So, gentlemen, let's give it our attention. So, Mark, what can you tell me about Alcoholics Anonymous?
Hi Jackie, my name's Mark, I'm an alcoholic. He's touching on these stats here, it's frightening how rife alcoholism is within within Glasgow and in Scotland. And I'm one of the lucky ones that managed to get into recovery. I've got a best friend that's in the fellowship who can try to usher me along, and there's a thing that alcoholics suffer from, and it's pride. And I felt as if I was too good for the place, and that coupled up with denial, I never thought I was an alcoholic. But Alcoholics Anonymous is it's a place where it works miracles. Must speak about myself. I went in and it's completely transformed my life. One that I never thought needed any attention to. But that's the power of the illness, alcoholism. It convinced me I was okay.
Yeah, I think the thing with AA, it's really a fellowship, isn't it? That's how they always describe it, and they always say you're a recovering alcoholic because you need that bond with the group. And could you tell us a bit more about the 12 traditions of AA, what it's actually based on?
Yeah. So the fellowship, I can't go down to the pub and start talking about how emotionally distraught I am, how emotionally unfit I am for the world. But if I go into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I know if people identify themselves as an alcoholic, I know that they'll feel the same way I do emotionally. So the fellowship, everybody's in it together. Our primary purpose is just to help a still suffering alcoholic. And and encourage them and give them hope. That's what I certainly got. And the traditions is fundamentally what Alcoholics Anonymous is built on. Anonymity.
Because I wanted to talk about that anonymity, because obviously, as I sort of said to you before we started recording, it's been quite difficult to get someone who's willing to talk about it. Why is the anonymity so important to anybody that's in recovery?
It's each individual's own journey.
Right.
So if I was to broadcast, if I was to turn around and show my face, give my real name and say, I'm a recovering alcoholic, and then someone round the corner goes to Alcoholics Anonymous and they're not successful,
right.
Then that brings Alcoholics Anonymous as a fellowship and into the spotlight. Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't work because it's not worked for Joe Blogs.
Yeah.
But the individual has got to put the work in. That's why there's people come in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's why there's people long-term sober, and people do struggle with it. So the anonymity, it's safeguarding.
Right.
It keeps the individual safe. It keeps Alcoholics Anonymous as a fellowship safe.
I think what I found about, I was at the honour really to be allowed to sit in as an observer to 2 Alcoholic Anonymous meetings, and I think the thing that totally stunned me, there's a certain atmosphere in these meetings, and I think what I found really heartwarming was how welcoming everybody was. There was no judgment, and within that environment, people didn't sugarcoat anything about what their experience was, and I felt it's because you all knew exactly where everybody else was coming from, and you gave everybody space to have their say. And I think that was really, really encouraging. I think it must be that what I got as an observer was that it must be quite difficult because outside everybody's judging you, but the minute you walk through that door, you're immediately accepted. Could you tell me a bit? Everybody knows about about the 12-step programme. Can you tell me a wee bit about that?
Yeah. So, the acceptance of walking into a room, that's the first time you get any kind of identification with as I was touching on, how I think. I perceive this world as a place I don't fit in. I perceive it as a very down and negative environment.
Right.
But that's the power of alcoholism. That convinces me that that's the way the world is. And the acceptance when I walk into the room is because people understand me, and they're able to say, listen, I think like that, I thought like that. You're thinking like that just now, this is how I get out of that situation. In the 12-step programme, that's where you're able to find out that for me, that alcohol was only a solution. Right. I was, I'm not going to dive too much into my childhood. There was a divorce there was abandonment issues, rejection, which carried on right through my life. Right. And in the end, I just didn't feel good enough for anybody or anything. Right. So the 12-step programme enabled me to learn about alcoholism. So the first 3 steps, Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't ask me to do anything. It gives me a bit of education on what alcoholism is. It asks me if I'm willing to believe in a higher power, which I choose to call God today, but it is not a religious programme. I think that's something that puts a lot of people off. They've got the idea that it's a bunch of Bible thumpers and they're not interested in it, just to be blunt about it. But that's not true, because from what I've understand is when you're talking about a higher power, that higher power can be anything. It could be nature, it could be, I know Buddhists who are alcoholics. Yep. It could be anything that gives you, because from what the fellowship appears to say, it's obviously physical, mental, but it's also spiritual, and it's trying to marry those 3 things up and to recognise those 3 things. Yep. Would I be right in saying that? Absolutely, yeah. So it's threefold in illness, twofold coupled with a spiritual malady. The physical side is, for the alcoholic, as soon as I took a drink, after swearing off at the full day, I had 1 drink and I couldn't stop. So that's a physical allergy. It sets up you know, my body can't break alcohol down the way a normal temperate drinker does.
Right.
I need more at the end of the night than what I did at the start of the night.
Right.
And the mental obsession, you know, I used to query that a wee bit. I would never think about alcohol all day, I would say. And, you know, some wise gentleman said, well, what do you say to yourself in the morning? And I would say, I'm never drinking again. I'm not drinking today. He says, well, alcohol's in your mind before you're even in the shower. You know, so I'm mentally obsessed by it, whether it be I'm drinking or trying to stay off it. And then throughout the day, you know, we call it, my mind's went blank, a peculiar mental twist.
Right.
You know, peculiar means like strange, so there's that strange twist in my thinking with the obsession already running through the day, and I'll say to myself, I'll be all right, I'll just have one. But this is all for me, you know, to deal with life, to deal with my malady, which all day is consistently trying to put me down,
right,
and convince me that I'm not good enough.
Right.
And the only way I feel suitable for the world is to take a drink.
right.
So for me, it's threefold.
What is the AA's view of alcoholism? Do they see it as a sort of physical addiction primarily that anybody can get, or is it still that mixture of different factors coming into it? Because when I was reading the sort of literature, and I think it's quite good the way they just sort of say, well, their key aim is to get people to stop drinking. And what was also really interesting was the fact that you're self-funded, that there's no outside influence. Yeah. And I quite like that. I mean, I think the idea of like, you're not influenced by MD, there's nobody calling the shots, and you're anonymous as well. So it just seems to be the ideal combination for an organisation to operate in that way. And it's been operating now for 75 years.
75 years last year, I think it was.
And I was, and it sort of helps millions of people worldwide. And it's been the most enduring programme, I think, for people that are trying to give up alcohol. You've got another role within AA, haven't you? You go, yeah. Could you tell us a wee bit about that, Mark?
Yeah. So there's many different service roles in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know.
And these are voluntary, aren't they?
Yes, these are all. My primary purpose today is to help the still suffering. You know, there's health roles, there's prison roles, there's criminal justice roles. You know, roundabout all that, which is a magazine which can get sent to inmates and stuff. You know, there's service roles within the group, but I've taken a role on within Glasgow region, which is to carry the message to employers. So what I try and do is to have some kind of communication with HR, with the wellbeing, with company owners or bosses, give them a bit of information to primarily try and get an investigation. Edit that out.
It's okay.
A presentation, which is an information-based session that myself and somebody else within the service role.
Right.
You know, it's 15 minutes normally, about a wee bit of AA history, what we offer, you know, with a 12-step programme, and then there's a 15-minute share from another alcoholic. So there's two alcoholics within the session, and then it's Q&A time. Because there's a lot of companies do have their own policy, but there's no other way to get that identification that an alcoholic needs is to hear it from
another
an alcoholic.
Yeah.
You know, my own experience tells me that with going to counselling and stuff like that, it was tick box exercises. You know, when I was younger, growing up in employment, there was never that opportunity to just to get a bit of knowledge about alcoholism. You know, I was struggling massively in my life, but I had no information about it. So what we try and do is just get an hour of the employer's time.
Is it management? Is it HR? Is it
anyone
anybody
that will listen?
Right.
So I try and contact HR first. You know, and then just kind of try and go down that route.
Right.
You know, I'll try and contact companies, whether that be face to face or email.
Right.
You know, I've got business cards, pamphlets, and all that kind of stuff. But an introductory letter will get sent first, and just try and just try and make them aware. It might not be for someone in the company. They might have a family member, you know, that like Andy here. You know, they might have a family member that it kind of resonates with them, and they can maybe take it back home.
See if you're thinking, when you're speaking to the employers, is there any specific signs they should be looking out in their employees? They may suspect someone's got a problem. What are the classics, the signals that someone's struggling in the workplace that may be alcohol related?
Yeah, I mean, there's as basic as late coming,
Right.
you know, not turning up for work. You know, you can have decision making.
Right.
You know, the productivity's a wee bit down.
Right.
You know, all this kind of stuff in the company as a whole brings the performance down. You know, mood swings.
Right.
You know, you can be a wee bit reserved. You know, you can be distant from your work colleagues.
Right.
So there is signs there, but it's just trying to piece them together.
Right.
You know, for the alcoholic, once I was aware of alcoholism, I was able to say, oh, that's quite obvious now that I understand it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the same really within the workplace. If people are aware of the warning signs and a wee bit of information about it, they might actually be able to say, right, okay, we could maybe help.
See if somebody within a workplace sort of recognises that and say a friend, it could be maybe a work colleague they're really fond of. How would you suggest they approach them? What should they say? Should they actually just be opening up and say, are you okay? Or that's a difficult thing to sort of like...
It's a difficult one. You know, again, my own experience with my wife saying, you know, you've got a problem with your drinking and stuff like that. You know, I would get my back up. What do you mean? I've still got a job, I've still got a licence, still got a house,
So
all these materialistic things I had. So that's quite tough to, if they're not in that session, you know, to approach them, it would be quite tough. But you can still, you can leave information, leaflets and pamphlets and stuff like that about the office, and just in the hope that they pick them up, you know.
What you were going back to your personal story, Mark, you were sort of saying that your wife sort of drew your attention to it. When we talked before, see when you first went to AA, did you go to AA to keep your wife and your children, or did you go to AA to solve the problem?
I went. So I was saying earlier on, my friend's in the fellowship, so he invited me along to his first birthday share, so he could see the stuff that I'm going through, and he's saying, right, that's the way I was behaving, you know, and that's me sugarcoating my behaviour and how much I was drinking and all that kind of stuff. So he tried to help me a couple of years before I went in, and I remember at that time being upset, you know, and my wife not fully understanding, you know, the depths of despair that I was in. You know, she was saying it's okay, he's fine, you know, and I get flung out of the house and stuff like that once we got to up until today anyway, the last drink I've had, because it's only a daily reprieve, that's all I've got, it's a day to stay off alcohol. But she'd give me an ultimatum, you know, I'm divorcing you, you know, won't see your child, you know, everything. But again, I was so full of pride, so full of ego, denial, I guess, as well, because I had everything,
and that's quite
and
interesting.
not understanding, you know. So I went for my wife.
Because superficially, I think when people look at guys like you and they say that you've got the wife, the family, the house, the car, the holidays, everything that everybody ticks that box for, and they would never suspect. But sometimes that's just the empty when if it's something deep inside you that you can't resolve. And I think there's always this perception, especially in Scotland, of someone's got an alcohol problem. They always assume it's from a scheme, you know, or a council estate. They never actually assume that it crosses all barriers. So see, when you first started to go to AA with your friend, did you start to change your attitude and thinking it was like it's something that you had to take responsibility for? Was that the road you take? Yeah,
so the first meeting I'd went to, my friend had he had suggested to go to a type of meeting, because there's many different types of meetings, and he had kind of directed me towards this one, and you know, we talk about a spiritual experience and a spiritual awakening, two different things, you know. And I believe that night I had a spiritual awakening because I went in so, as I'm saying, so full of pride and ego, like, this is not for me, I'm not an alcoholic, kind of brushing people away when they try to help. And then the illness was explained. So within 15 minutes, my complete, you know, a spiritual awakening is like your mind changing, really.
Sure.
My full mind had just completely turned around.
Right.
And I was all in after that, not fully understanding at that time. But I was going for my wife. I was going to go once a week, and I went to nearly 90 meetings in 90 days after that.
Fabulous.
It's just a complete change of thinking. So quite quickly, I was in it for me. Quite quickly, I started to realise, you know, my behaviours were unacceptable. Quite quickly, I realised I was very selfish and self-centred. And all that started to change through good guidance and help.
Yeah, because obviously people want to know how these meetings. The meetings are usually about what, an hour and a half.
Yeah,
long?
they're very about 60 to 90 minutes.
And they're sort of dotted in like church halls and various other organisations.
Church halls, community halls.
Yeah.
I mean, we laugh. We have a meeting on the way to the car because there's 3 alcoholics in it. You know,
Never miss a minute.
No, I mean, even just standing to somebody outside, you know, you could be talking to a newcomer and you don't see them, and then you see them 6 months later and they'll say, I remember you said such and such, and you know, I'll never forget that. And you know, it's the power of conversation. You just don't know what one sentence might have an effect on somebody, and all I'm doing is passing down stuff that's been said to me. You know, it's AA's message, it's not mine. I've only got an experience within, but it's Alcoholics Anonymous' message.
Andy, obviously you've heard sort of Mark talking about how that's affected his family. I'd like to speak to you about the perspective of being the family member. Can you tell me a wee bit about how alcohol affected you in your life?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for asking so long, Jackie. And thanks, Mark, for sharing that. That was really good to listen to. Yeah, without wishing to demonise alcoholics, I never knew anything other than my dad being drunk.
Right.
I would wake up most mornings and my dad would be drunk. Sorry, that's a lie. I can remember maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 years of age. There was this kind of code he went through. He would wake up most mornings and be incredibly sorry about what happened the night before. He was a very violent man, very aggressive man. He would smash your house up. And that's not the case for everybody. I don't mean that. It's not the case for every alcoholic. And it's not the case for everybody that's living or has lived with alcoholism. But that was my story. And I would grow up most mornings with this big knot in my stomach because most days was the same. But as I say, it would promise he wouldn't drink because of what happened the night before. And then you could actually see it. I can actually remember it maybe 12 o'clock. I don't wish to make light of it, but my dad used to say a thing, he wouldn't drink before 12, and I thought he was quite posh. It's because the off sales didn't open to 12. I didn't know that when I was that young, you know. But come 12 o'clock, you can actually see him rattling, see him craving booze and needing booze. And again, like Andy was, like Mark was saying, promising that he wouldn't, but I'll just go for one then. That's this kind of thing that Mark was explaining. In his head, he was probably just hoping he could go for one, go for two, and that would be it. But inevitably, most days ended up the same, where he would get incredibly angry and aggressive by 5, 6, 7 o'clock, and it would repeat itself. So I've kind of grew up knowing that this was going to happen most days. So I've grew up most of my young life incredibly insular, incredibly frightened, incredibly scared. But there was things like when my dad was sober in the morning time, especially during summer holidays, I would imagine, for school, I would talk to him and maybe share stuff with him, tell him stuff. But come maybe 4 or 5 o'clock when he would get drunk and getting angry, that stuff would get weaponised and used against me. So I learned to shut down. I learned not to trust, not to tell people stuff, to keep quiet, to keep everything to myself. So taking that into young adulthood, into 12, 13, 14, when I'm supposed to be meeting girls, I'm still terrified. I am absolutely, I'm going to be in constant on my stomach. This shame that kind of follows me about, that I can't bring him to him, just in case it kicks off again, all that kind of stuff. So I was very, very insular and believed that it was only me that this was happening to. It was just our family. It was happening everywhere. I grew up in the East End of Glasgow. It was happening everywhere. It was very, very common. But it was this feeling it was just me. So this real fear, real dread and fear that I grew up with most days followed me about into young adulthood. And that if we would talk about stuff in the house, if we meeting about stuff, there was never how you feeling, how's things. It was always just rage. And there was always this kind of anger undercurrent. And my wee ma would come in. Usually she'd be working and she'd come in, and that's when it would kick off, and it'd be like, you know. And we would get sent. And I've heard people in meetings before saying that when the anger and the fighting was starting, the wains were upstairs, so they didn't hear. We hear. Do you know the wains here, unfortunately? And take all that in. So as I say, going for that child to that very, very frightened wee guy. It's a weird thing. I know I grew up with family, and we would witness this.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I had brothers and sisters, aye, but that's what I'm saying. We would witness this kind of carnage on a daily basis, and we never spoke about it. It was never mentioned. We would, do you know, it was this kind of unwritten rule that you don't talk about stuff like that. You don't mention it. You don't take it outside you definitely don't take it outside the door of the house and tell other people what's going on. It was this top secret stuff. Do you know, you had to keep it within the walls of the family. So I found my story is that when I kind of went into the workplace and stuff, I was very ill-equipped. I always felt, even when I get married at first, and when I had, you know, kids and stuff, I always felt that they call it a counterfeit adult. I felt that I was portraying as an adult. I had a mortgage, you know, I had bills, I had a car, like I was saying, the mortgage, the house and the car, and still felt that frightened me when. Still hadn't grew up emotionally, ever grew up emotionally. Still felt the feelings I had when I was 5, 6, 7 years of age when faced with certain situations, incapable of dealing with them because I hadn't emotionally developed. So that was kind of what my biggest illness was. And then getting into the workplace, I worked in a predominantly male environment. Where if we didn't talk about feelings and didn't talk about emotions and how things were affected us before, we definitely didn't talk about them in this work environment. And unfortunately, I think what Mark was talking about, we need to do this. We need to go into workplaces, and especially with men, and talk to men and get rid of this counterfeit male stereotype that's out there because it's fatally flawed. As I say, my story was kind of in that environment. And we were talking about it when we were the first kind of chat we had, Jackie.
Yeah.
There's guys, when they hit 16, 17, it becomes then competitive. You need to be able to drink 7 pints, 8 pints with other guys that are boozing. Otherwise, you're no manly. There's other stuff gets said. I don't really want to say the podcast, but there's abuse gets kind of hurled at you. So this kind of competition is always there. And there's this competition to be the most manly and the most male. And I found through my journey, again through this kind of spiritual journey I've embarked on, maybe 3, 5, 6 years, maybe into meetings, I wasn't in the habit of talking to men. Never in the habit of talking to men about feelings and emotions and stuff. But I started chatting to men in the sister fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is Al-Anon, one of the best kept secrets in Scotland, I think it is. But I'd started talking to males. To backtrack, I'd been sexually abused when I was 10 as well, and that went on for a period of time. So that also defined a huge part of who I was as well, about being damaged and being broken and being unworthy and being less than everybody else because this had happened as well. So there's a few things going on in the background. So I never really spoke to men.
What made you go to Al-Anon? How did you find out about that?
My dad got sober for a period of time when I was 19. That's probably the first time I'd seen him sober, actually. And he'd went to meetings, local meetings. And he's one of his really good Alcoholics Anonymous friends was having a birthday meeting, and we were invited. So that was my first interaction and viewing of an AA meeting. And I loved, like you say, I loved the feeling in it. It was like you were so welcomed and stuff. But unfortunately for my dad, that didn't last. He did go out and get and drink again a while later. But that, when I was 19, that was my first ever introduction to it. So when I got to a point in my life, I was in a relationship, and 10 years it lasted, I think, and on the 10th year, it's the strangest thing. I had became the person I most hated. I became my dad, without booze, without drinking, arguing, fighting, shouting, never physically violent, but this overwhelming need to control everything, and make rule on everything, and be in charge of everything. And my partner and my kids at that time couldn't take it anymore, so they left. And that was in 2000.
At that point, Andy, what were you thinking?
Oh, that was the lowest. I think the lowest part of my life then was I sat with when my wife was away. In fact, when my wife took the kids away, they went to stay with her mother. My brother came up from England. He was into darts, so there was a competition on in the Normandy Hotel in Renfrew, and it was Eric Bristow, the big famous darts players and stuff. So he was coming up, and I met him that morning. Then my wife's left me the night before.
Right.
She's taking the kids, and it's absolute pandemonium. And I took him to that competition, and he knew nothing. And I was just mixing in, and do you know what, this false facade, can I let him know? Because it's defeat. Do you know, I'm admitting that I'm beaten, I've been defeated, and I can't keep, excuse my language, but I can't keep my shit together, and I can't have him to think that. Because of the way I've grown up, I need to keep my shit together. That's number one priority. I need to maintain this aura and this facade that I'm coping and I'm managing, because I'm terrified inside. So a couple of days later, I'm sitting with a bit of cardboard, and I wrote this list. I thought it was quite clever, but I wrote this list of all the things that was wrong that I could fix. And it was like, do you know, I was doing 5 asides, I was playing 11 asides, I was playing snooker, loads of stuff I was doing. And my poor partner was, she was doing the lunches and the dishes and all the housework and all that. So I thought, if I move some of that stuff to that list and some of that stuff to that list, that'll fix it.
Right.
And I phoned her, and she came down with my youngest daughter, and we were sitting in the kitchen. And I was explaining this to my wife, and I thought, this is quite clever, this will work. And my daughter, who was, I'm trying to think, 12, probably 12 at the time, said, "Dad, you know, I can't come back and live with you, because you'll be okay for 2 weeks, and then you'll revert. You'll go back. You can't maintain what you're doing on this list. You will go back to the guy who's mental." And that was probably the saddest point in my life. And that's when I thought, I need to get myself sorted. And that's when I remembered, again, God willing, this meeting I went to when I was 19, that Al-Anon was out there. Because I knew I was broke. I knew that how I was behaving wasn't the way I wanted to be and wasn't who I wanted to be. But I didn't know how else to be, because my examples had been this manic aggression, you know, the different stuff that goes with that. So I didn't have any like role models to gauge this is how I could be as a dad, as a husband, as a friend, as a brother, as anything. It was just this real obsession stuff. Because I think I've kind of learned, if I'm 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years of age, and I'm waking 14 hours a day, 12 hours of that day is obsessed with how do I get my dad sober? What can I say? What can I do? What plan can I come up with? What formula is out there to make this guy stop drinking? Because if he stops drinking, everything will be great. Everything will be fine.
What about your mum during this time?
My wee ma worked. She worked a couple of jobs. I was talking about this the other night, actually. I don't really know much about my ma, which is quite sad as well. Because
was it because everything was so locked down?
Yeah.
Emotionally, that nobody was really actually talking about anything?
It was a haze. I think rightly so. I think you see soap operas, films, plays, whatever it might be, and they have a storyline about addiction, and the storyline is focused on the alcoholic, the drug addict, whatever it might be, and it's a story that has to be told. But nobody ever seems to tell the story about the people in the background that are affected by this behaviour and this addiction, and have to go in and concentrate in their life. Like I worked in an organisation, and I'd go into the office, and there'd maybe be 20, 30, 40 sometimes people, and I would say to the manager, I was incredibly friendly with, I said, guaranteed there's 20 people in this office who are absolutely screaming inside, and you'll know. There'll be women coming in there, maybe their husbands haven't come home for 3 nights. There'll be guys in there that they've not seen their wives for 2 days, they don't know where they are because they've not come home for a boozing expedition, and they've got to come in and function and maintain this kind of level of sanity in order to pay the mortgage and make sure the wains get out and make sure the wains get to school and stuff. And again, it's not to demonise alcoholics or addiction in any way, but there is a kind of B-side to it. And it's a story that's very, very seldom told of these men and women and kids, even kids that are going to school, because Al-Anon does a thing through public information.
See when you went to Al-Anon, it's like what you were saying, Mark, like you went to the meetings and suddenly you started to sort of change, accept the responsibility and start to change your behaviour. When you went to, obviously you were very angry and distressed before you went to Al-Anon. When you went into those meetings, at what point did you begin to recognise the damage that had been done and how it affected you?
Well, I think that one sentence you said there is probably the definition of my spiritual journey. I went into meetings, and maybe within a couple of meetings, again, there was I've got a wee vein in my head that pulses now and again, and it was be anger and stuff. And I remember saying to one of the women in the meeting, I says, can I swear? It's just, I would say, I'm fucking raging. I'm absolutely fucking raging. She went, Alan, you're hurt.
Yeah.
That right there.
Does that resonate, Mark?
Yeah, very similar.
Yeah.
It's like parallel stories from different perspectives, but it's almost like the same. I wouldn't say a process, but it's the same. It's like trying to come to a point of recognition, and then taking it from that point. Once you've recognised it, it's almost like halfway to getting feeling better about yourself. That's how I perceive this. That's what you're both telling me.
It's all about acceptance.
Yeah.
From Alcoholics Anonymous' point of view, the first steps, that's the foundations of, recovery. That's got to be, the illusion for me to drinking safety's got to be smashed, and I've got to fully accept that I'm an alcoholic, and Andy's sharing his experience, and it's very similar, not feeling less than, and just emotionally, for me anyway, unfit for the world. It's very similar, and then the acceptance.
I think it's the same. It's a kind of parody, I suppose. Alcoholics Anonymous, the first step is admitting we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives would become unmanageable. And that's exactly the same for Al-Anon. Because I've spent my whole life, since 5 years of age, trying to find a solution to make my dad stop drinking, or to get me to stop drinking. Powerless. There's nothing I can do. That's when it becomes apparent that I'm not in meetings to get my dad sober, I'm not in meetings to get anybody else sober. I'm in meetings to heal myself from the effects of somebody else's drinking. And I think there might, from my experience, there is this thing, get out of it, build a bridge, get out of it, go on with it, that kind of a thing. I think we need to realise that men are damaged. But there's guys jumping off of bridges at 3 a.m. because they don't feel they're measuring up to what a man is, what a male is. And again, this need to self-medicate because it's that as well. My dad probably had a terrible life. There's stuff I've heard about my dad since he passed away. His life wasn't great as well. And he was maybe self-medicating, and alcoholism was a part of his life.
I think male suicide is is another big issue, because it's most prevalent, I think, under men under 40. And that's pretty bad. That's a lot of young men. And I think it's like what you're saying, it's maybe this whole perception of I think particularly now, there's an awful lot of things going on in society where I would say men are demonised. And I don't know whether it's just because, I don't know, it just seems to be that I would say it was a trend at the moment. whereas I don't think it helps men at all. But going back to what you're saying, Andy, about maybe a traditional view of what a man is, like you go to the pub on a Friday night and you drink 6 pints, and I think that harks back to, if you think about Scotland and Scotland's industrial past, where that was quite traditional. You'd be coming out the factory or the industry gates, you'd have your wage packet, you'd be going to maybe a pub or whatever, and it would be that cycle. And the number of times you hear where it's like, you know, the wife wants to try and, in very old stories, to get something out the wage packet before it disappears into the bar.
Very much so.
So I think that there's a lot of history there, and I think if you look at it and look at, there's certain societal things. When the industrial past of Scotland was stripped away, men, I think most men in particular, identify with the job they do, but if they don't have a job, and it's like what those stats say, if you look at alcohol in Scotland at the moment, it's most affected in deprived areas. If you look at the deprived areas, the unemployment rates are soaring. So it's all to do, I think, with identity and trying to retain an identity that you are a worthwhile human being, you know. That's my take on it, but what do you guys think? This is your podcast, by the way. You're allowed to have an opinion.
Alcoholism convinced me that I was worthless.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't good for my wife. I wasn't a good enough dad. Constantly comparing myself. You know, the judgment son.
And yet you were superficially successful, Mark.
Functioning alcoholic, successful in what I was doing. You know, even still today, you know, I can very quickly become, you know, we call it running in self-will. All
Is that why you always talk about, is it one day at a time, taking one day at a time or something?
Well, I've only got today. The most important time for me is right now, is the present.
Right.
You know, I can't think about tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen in 5 minutes, never mind tomorrow. So I try to keep it as present, which doesn't happen all the time, you know. But, you know, I can very quickly become full of self and full of self-doubt, and there's nobody in this world has done me in the way my own head has.
Yeah.
That's just fact, you know. Nobody. You know, I get approached for a job, but I'll be in that job today, and you know, my head will be saying you're not good enough. You know, but that's my malady. My malady, it tries to convince me that I'm not good enough, which is illness, alcoholism.
Do you get solace, or does it help the fact that as you say, you volunteer for AA and you're doing your employment liaison? Does that help you on even a daily basis, because you are doing some good and you are going out there and you are talking about it and you are being open about it as well? Yeah,
there's no better feeling than helping other people. You know, never in a million years did I think I was an alcoholic. Never mind my experience, be one that would help someone.
Yeah.
So to have that experience, which is my own, and you know, stuff that I'm extremely not proud about doing, but that's what makes the alcoholic comfortable. That's what brings the alcoholic out of their shell. That's what makes them think, okay, I'm not as unique as what I thought.
Yeah.
And there's no better feeling than that. It's completely all the work I do to pay the mortgage and all that. I don't get as much satisfaction as what I do.
There's nothing better than helping people, isn't it? Really, at the end of the day, really.
It's amazing, you know, to be part of it.
What about you, Andy?
I think it's important. Things like this as well. I think probably I need to explain as well. You don't get to see my face, not because I'm ashamed of anything I'm saying to you, or because I'm ashamed of my past or whatever's happened, or I'm definitely not ashamed of having to go. It means it's for anonymity, and it's because I've got kids, I've got sons and daughters, I've got brothers and sisters, and if my face is shown, people then go up to my brothers and sisters who are unable to talk about their experience in the way I have, because I've got the benefit of a 12-step programme. But they could be approached and, oh, what a life you've had. I've seen your brother there. And they're going to get questioned and brought in it and be made to talk about things that they're ill-equipped to talk about and maybe have no desire to talk about. So that's the reason. It's not because of any element of shame. But I think men's health in general, when I first came to Al-Anon meetings, it was in the year 2000, I'm going to say it's probably 98% women in the meetings. Because I think it was perceived at the time, and I don't know the statistics, I've no clue, but it was majority of men that were alcoholics. There's more and more and more men, thankfully, coming into Al-Anon meetings and talking about how they're feeling and how they're maybe not coping, they're coping, whatever it might be, and getting this 12-step program into their life to help them deal with life on life terms. But it's not just sons. I mean, there's guys who have wives that are alcoholics, the mothers of alcoholics, sisters who are alcoholics. And I think there is this, there's always been a thing, in my opinion as well, where if you would maybe say to somebody in the street doesn't know the full story behind what's going on, and you'd say, I'm dealing with this and I'm dealing with this, and they're getting drunk and they're doing this and they're doing that, and the first thing you get is fucking leave them. But you love this person.
I know.
You love this
That's
person.
totally
Do you know?
different.
It's no.
But you
It's,
love with somebody.
it's not that easy.
Yeah.
It's not a question of if you could turn that off and walk away. Where is love? I mean, as I say, I've grew up emotionally distant for a lot of people my whole life because I never trusted. I learned not to trust at a very, very early age. So most of my relationships growing up were there was definitely an emotional distance. I talk about it. It's like when you go for an X-ray and they put that lead on to stop you getting harmed, to stop other people getting harmed with X-rays. I'd one of them emotionally. You could see me, you could talk to me, but you were never going to get emotionally attached to me at the level where it would become dangerous. Because again, if I let you see that you mean something to me, you can hurt me. I'm empowering you. And it sounds...
But that goes back to what you were saying about your dad.
100%.
And you've learnt that lesson from your dad.
Yeah. No, from him, from his addiction, from his illness.
Yeah, from his addiction and how
I
he
mean,
weaponised what you'd revealed to him.
Like Mark, I need to separate the person that's my dad for the illness he had.
Absolutely.
He was so much more than an alcoholic. I mean, he taught me how to play chess before I was 5. He made reading and writing before I went to school. He had his, he'd make bread and all that and different things. So he would do loads of stuff that were incredibly positive, but this horrible illness of addiction to alcohol. But as a result of going to meetings, to go for that person who was so emotionally distant for people, and it's a horrible way to live. Yeah, it's a life I didn't really know I had until I go onto this spiritual journey and learned that that's what was wrong. It was fear. 90% of my life was fear-based. So to get rid of that, to get a higher power in my life, to get these 12 steps in my life, to have trust in my life, to get sponsorship, loads of things that the 12-step program promises, to go for that into the relationship that I'm involved in now. I'm married, been married for 20-something years, and I've got a family, and it's a million times different because these people know I'm in a real relationship. It comes at a cost. It's no scary. I don't mean it's scary, but these people can burst my heart wide open. Because it's real, it's actually real. I'm invested in them emotionally and vice versa. And we talk about stuff and we know each other and it's so much more than a superficial level. I know my wife's hopes, dreams, aspirations, joys, fears. Same with my daughter, same with my son. So it's more real. I feel as if, it's funny, see when I was growing up, I felt as if I was watching a film. I wasn't taking part in my life. I wasn't really involved in decision making. Things would just happen. They would just happen, and I'd find myself in situations and places and jobs and relationships with no prior thought and with no emotion. Do you know, it's just I would land in places and with people and different things. Like, how did I get here? But it was because I didn't want to be on my own. It was better to be with somebody than being on my own and being lonely and being frightened again, regardless of what that relationship brought. And that wasn't too great for myself either. But to be now in a healthy relationship, healthy marriage, with healthy people in my life and healthy friends, to invest in friendships as well and be there for friends, and know what it is now.
that you'll probably feel the same way, Mark, as well. You've
Oh,
probably,
absolutely.
because you've got friends and you're investing your time by volunteering to help people to go into companies. So to me, if I'm listening to both these stories, you've both been through an awful lot, but it's a happy ending.
Yeah.
Really. So yeah, because you've both got through it and you're still here.
It's a happy journey.
It's a happy journey. Exactly.
Yeah, it's a happy journey.
Look, guys, that's been really insightful. I want to talk about something as well, if you don't mind. And it's really about this book that I've got. When you read something and it stays with you. This book stayed with me, and it's called Riding the Elephant, and it's by Craig Ferguson. Everybody knows who Craig Ferguson is. It's one of these books when you sort of read it and think, wow, he is a recovering alcoholic, has been for about 30 years. It's a great book. What comes across is that he loves Scotland. He's incredibly witty. It's one of these books that you read and you laugh out loud. And he's also incredibly candid. He talks about his drinking, and there's a story in it which I suspect he is a member of AA, just by some of the things he says. He relates a story. He went to the Melbourne Comedy Festival, and he was there. He was drinking really heavily, and it was the first time one morning he encountered withdrawal. So he was desperate for a bar, and what he says in the book is, in any town, in any city, you will always find one bar. You know the way the bars that are open all the time for men that do shift work. Desperate for a drink, realised there was one 2 blocks away. But he still didn't see himself he didn't want to see himself as an alcoholic. And he says this in the book because he didn't want to stop drinking. So he says, I'm really sort of quoting here, he found a bar 2 blocks away, and the barman, quote, a chipper young goth, kept the drinks coming, eventually setting up 3 at a time. Can I tell you something? She asked me. Craig suggests, you drink too much. Now, it goes on, and I think it's just really quite funny. It's funny, but it's candid at the same time. Excuse me, I have to get the glasses on for this. So she says, you drink too much. I told her it had been pointed out before. Yeah, I'm sure people have said it to you before. I am an Australian barmaid that works in a pub that's open in the morning in a shitty part of Melbourne. Excuse my language. If I notice you drink too much, you really must drink too much. So he says, you think I'm an alkie? I asked her. Everyone here's an alkie, Bruce. It's 10 a.m. and you're the alkiest alkie I've ever seen. You're like an alkie from a movie or something. I laughed and ordered another drink. Now, what's really interesting, that happened, and it was 5 years later before he went to his first meeting. He never says it, but he said the first person that he met was Tommy. But from what Tommy says, you suspect that it was an AA meeting, and I'm speculating here, so if Craig Ferguson ever hears this, I'm really sorry. But I thought that was quite good, and I think what's quite good is like to get someone of that profile being so honest about it. I mean, it's like, it reminded me of the AA meetings I dropped in on, that didn't sugarcoat anything. I mean, he says he behaved badly. He says he couldn't get, sometimes, he was having trouble getting, gigs. But then when he realised, he was actually in London when he started being sober, and how much nicer people were to him when they were employing him again. So I thought I just had to mention that because it's strange when something resonates. And I was researching the alcoholism at the time. But guys, if you want a good read, that's it. But before we go, is there anything that you guys would want to say to the men out there that they should think about, or that we haven't covered? Anything? Andy?
It's not my mission in life, because again, I think I still have to keep myself safe. But if somebody comes to me and they're explaining that they're going through some shit, maybe somebody in their life that's boozing or addicted to whatever, to let them know there is a place to go, to let them know there is help. Like you were talking about a guy in the book there, and like Mark was saying, that whoever has the problem needs to be ready to do something about it. I can't make somebody get sober.
Yeah.
I can't doesn't matter how much booze I pour away, how much crying I do, how much screaming I do, many threats I make. Unfortunately, that nature of addiction, if that person isn't ready to get sober, that's their journey.
Yeah.
And again, going to meetings, people learn to live with people that are boozing and have an amazing life, regardless whether somebody continues to booze and continues to be addicted to alcohol. They can still have an amazing life. Life doesn't have to stop, do you know? And many marriages succeed still with somebody boozing in the marriage as well, because it's learning to be in your own zone as well. Do you know, your own life doesn't have to stop. Your life can go on. It's no selfish to promote any aspect of your own life while somebody unfortunately has the addiction of booze. So I wish I'd went to meetings years and years and years ago, but it wasn't for me.
So the recommendation would be to go to meetings for you both. What about you, Mark?
Yeah.
What would be your
I
final
mean,
word?
if there's anybody listening out there that thinks they've got a problem with alcohol, you know, ask yourself 2 questions. You know, once you start, can you stop? And once you stop, can you stay stopped? Because, you know, as I was saying earlier on, it comes in 3 ways, and I needed more than what I did at the start of the night, you know. And alcoholism, it doesn't matter if you're homeless, if you're a tradesman, if you work in an office, or you're a heart surgeon. Alcoholism,
It's
it
across the
runs
board.
right through the board, you know. And there's absolutely no shame in coming to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, we spoke about the fellowship.
I mean, the meetings are very welcoming. I mean, there is something about them that, because there's that lack of judgment, but there's also that understanding from everybody knows the situation.
I think
you're in.
both fellowships have got the same message. You're no longer alone.
Yeah.
And that feeling on its own, this feeling you're not dealing with it, and it's not just you. It's the biggest untold story.
But you're both also saying something else, and I think I'm going to go back to, it was one of the people that really influenced the founders of AA. There was 2, I think it was Carl Jung and it was William James. Now, he's the father of American psychology. It's not just recognising it. I'm just going to quote what he said, which was taken on board by the founders of AA. It says, action may not always bring happiness, but there is no happiness without action. So you've got to take that action and take that responsibility. And that's, I think something that everybody should take to heart. You've really got to make that first step, go to that first meeting.
Yeah.
Would you say that? Would you say that was right, guys?
Overcome the fear. Yeah.
I mean, even like, if you think that you're an alcoholic, you're much better coming in to a meeting and finding out you're not, rather than being out there thinking you might be an alcoholic when it turns out you are.
Yeah.
You know, I know men and women in the fellowship that are not even in their 20s. You know, I know people that are 45, 40, 46, 47, 50 years sober. So the age range, it's so widespread now. It's not what you see in the movies.
No.
It's a lovely place, and I can't speak any more highly of it.
Guys, you've been fabulous, and thank you for being so honest. I really do appreciate it. It's been a long journey to get to this point. So thank you for coming to Men Only, and I hope to see both you maybe in the future, and we'll have a wee catch up. Is that okay?
I hope you don't have the need for meetings.
Right, we'll go for a coffee and a cake anytime you want. Okay.
Thanks so much, Jackie. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, guys. Alcohol addiction, as discussed and the statistics reflect, have devastated many lives. The purpose of all the Men Only podcasts is to not only offer a platform for honest and open discussion of men's issues, but to provide a source of information in order that viewers, at the very least, know where and who to contact if the subject discussed personally impacts on their life. I sincerely hope that anyone who watches this podcast will now be encouraged to reach out, be it Alcoholics Anonymous, Al-Anon, or any of the other organisations who support the aims of tackling alcohol addiction, and to seek help or support if you're a family member or friend. A list of contacts and organisations can be found on the Men Only website. On a final note, when researching alcoholism, I discovered Carl Jung and William James, philosopher and father of American psychology, influenced the founding members of AA. I'd like to leave you with a quote from William James. Action may not always bring you happiness, but there's no happiness without action. Perhaps now's the time to take action. Thank you for watching Men Only.